The gleaming spires of Nexus Station pierced the inky blackness of space, a testament to the technological marvels of a dozen alien races. Amidst the bustle of its crowded corridors, 16-year-old Ethan Parker felt both awe and isolation. As the only human aboard this interstellar hub, he was a curiosity, sometimes admired, often dismissed, but always an outsider. Ethan's parents had been part of the first human diplomatic mission to Nexus Station 5 years ago. A tragic accident during a routine shuttle maintenance had left him orphaned, stranded among the stars. The station's governing council, in a rare show of interspecies compassion, had allowed him to stay. Now, he worked odd jobs, determined to prove that humanity deserved its place among the galactic community. Today, Ethan found himself in the lower levels of the station, far from the shimmering facades and sleek technology of the upper decks. Here, the air hung heavy with the mingled scents of 1,000 alien cuisines and the acrid tang of industrial lubricants. He was on an errand for Grix, the cantankerous Valerian who ran a repair shop and occasionally employed Ethan for deliveries. As he navigated the twisting corridors, a commotion caught his attention. A group of Zigrathi, insectoid aliens known for their hive mentality and disdain for individualism, had surrounded something or someone. Their chittering voices rose in a cacophony of mockery and disgust. Curiosity piqued, Ethan edged closer. Through a gap in the Zigrathi's towering forms, he glimpsed a huddled figure on the ground. It was an alien unlike any he'd seen before, humanoid in shape, but with skin that shimmered like liquid silver and eyes that glowed with an inner light. The alien's tattered robes and trembling hands spoke of desperation and need. Without thinking, Ethan pushed through the circle of Zigrathi. "Hey, what's going on here?" he demanded, his voice cracking slightly with the bravado of youth. The largest Zigrathi turned, its compound eyes flashing with annoyance. "This is not your concern, human child. This beggar is a blight on our station. We are merely encouraging it to leave." Ethan's eyes narrowed. He'd faced his share of bullies on Earth, and while the stakes here might be higher, the principle remained the same. "Last I checked, this station belongs to everyone, and I don't see how tormenting someone who's already down on their luck makes anything better." A ripple of amusement passed through the Zigrathi. One of them, smaller than the rest, stepped forward. "Oh, look at the little human, playing hero. Don't you know, child? Your kind are barely tolerated here. You have no standing to interfere in our affairs." Ethan felt a flush of anger and embarrassment, but he stood his ground. "Maybe not, but I know right from wrong. And this?" He gestured at the cowering alien. "This is wrong." For a tense moment, Ethan thought the Zigrathi might turn their aggression on him. But then, to his surprise, they began to laugh, a harsh, clicking sound that set his teeth on edge. "Very well, human," the leader said, mandibles clacking in amusement. "If you care so much for this wretch, it's your problem now. But remember, compassion is a weakness in this universe. You'll learn that soon enough." With that, the Zigrathi dispersed, leaving Ethan alone with the mysterious alien. Up close, he could see that what he had mistaken for tattered robes were actually part of the alien's body, a shimmer membrane that undulated softly, almost like the surface of a soap bubble. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, kneeling beside the alien. "Can you understand me?" The alien's glowing eyes fixed on him, and Ethan felt a strange sensation, as if his very thoughts were being gently probed. Then, a voice spoke directly into his mind, rich with gratitude and a hint of curiosity. "I understand you, young human, and I thank you for your kindness. It has been a long time since anyone has shown me such consideration." Ethan blinked, startled by the telepathic communication. "You're welcome. I'm Ethan. Can you tell me your name? And maybe why those Zigrathi were giving you such a hard time?" The alien seemed to hesitate, its shimmering skin rippling with uncertainty. You may call me Lyra. As for the Zigrathi, they, like many on this station, have little patience for those they see as unnecessary. I have fallen on difficult times, and in their eyes that makes me worthless." Ethan frowned. He knew that life on Nexus Station could be harsh for those without status or resources, but he hadn't realized how bad it could get. That's not right. Everyone deserves a chance, no matter where they come from or what they look like. Lara's eyes seemed to glow a bit brighter. Your words are kind, Ethan, but I fear they reflect a naivety that this universe will soon crush. You would do well to be more pragmatic in your dealings. Maybe, Ethan conceded, but I'd rather be naive and kind than cynical and cruel. Look, I don't have much, but I was on my way to get some food. Would you like to join me? For a moment, Lara was silent, and Ethan worried he had overstepped. Then, with a grace that belied her apparent frailty, Lara rose to her feet. Standing, she was taller than Ethan had realized, easily 7 feet in height. I would be honored to share a meal with you, young Ethan. Perhaps you can tell me more about your species. Humans are something of a mystery to many of us. As they made their way through the winding corridors of the lower levels, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Lara than met the eye. The way she moved, the subtle shift of her shimmering skin, it all spoke of a hidden strength and dignity. They found a small eatery tucked away in a corner, specializing in cuisines suitable for a variety of species. As they sat down with their meals, a nutrient-rich protein bar for Ethan and a bowl of glowing gelatinous spheres for Lyra, Ethan noticed the stares and whispers from the other patrons. I'm sorry about that, he said, gesturing vaguely at the onlookers. I guess humans aren't the only ones who get treated like outsiders here. Lyra's mental voice carried a note of amusement. Do not trouble yourself, Ethan. I have grown accustomed to such treatment. But tell me, how does a young human like yourself come to be alone on Nexus Station? Ethan hesitated, then decided that honesty was the best policy. He told Lyra about his parents, about the accident that had left him orphaned, and about his determination to prove that humanity had something valuable to offer the Galactic community. As he spoke, he noticed a change in Lyra's demeanor. The alien seemed to be listening with intense focus, her glowing eyes never leaving his face. When he finished, there was a long moment of silence. You have endured much, Ethan Parker, Lyra said at last. And yet you have not allowed your experiences to harden your heart. That is remarkable. Ethan shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I'm just trying to do what's right. My parents always said that the true measure of a person, or a species, is how they treat others, especially those who can't offer anything in return. Lyra's skin rippled in what Ethan was beginning to recognize as a sign of strong emotion, a wise philosophy, one that is, perhaps, all too rare in this universe. As they finished their meal, Ethan realized with a start that he had completely forgotten about his errand for Grix. Oh no, he groaned. I'm going to be in so much trouble. I was supposed to deliver some parts hours ago. Lara tilted her head, a gesture that reminded Ethan of a curious bird. Perhaps I can be of assistance. Where were you meant to make this delivery? Ethan gave her the details, and to his surprise, Lara nodded. I know of this place. It is not far. Come, I will show you a shortcut. As they navigated the back passages of the station, Ethan marveled at Lyra's knowledge of Nexus's layout. She moved with a surety that spoke of long familiarity, despite her apparent status as a homeless wanderer. They reached Grix's shop in record time. The Valarian was predictably upset, his tentacles writhing with agitation as he berated Ethan for his tardiness. But then Lara stepped forward, and something extraordinary happened. She spoke, not telepathically, but in a melodious voice that seemed to resonate on multiple frequencies at once. The words were in a language Ethan didn't understand, but their effect on Grix was immediate. The Valarian's tentacles stilled, and his multifaceted eyes widened in what looked like shock. When Lyra finished speaking, Grix turned to Ethan, his voice now almost deferential. It seems I was hasty in my judgment, young human. Your friend here has explained the situation. You're compassionate as you credit. The delivery fee is waived, and if you need more work in the future, you need only ask. Stunned, Ethan could only nod his thanks. As they left the shop, he turned to Lyra, burning with questions. What was that? How did you know that language? And why did Grix react like that? Lyra's mental voice held a note of gentle amusement. There is much you do not know about the intricacies of galactic politics and history, young Ethan, but perhaps in time you will learn. For now, know this. Kindness, such as you have shown me today, is a rare and precious thing. It has power beyond what you can imagine. As they parted ways, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his life had somehow shifted on its axis. He had set out to prove humanity's worth to the galaxy, but in the process, he might have stumbled upon something far more significant. Little did he know that his simple act of compassion had set in motion a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of Nexus Station and change the course of galactic history forever. In the weeks following his encounter with Lyra, Ethan found himself drawn back to the lower levels of Nexus Station with increasing frequency. He told himself it was out of concern for mysterious aliens' well-being, but deep down, he knew there was more to it. Lyra's presence stirred something in him, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since losing his parents. Their meetings became a regular occurrence, always in out-of-the-way corners where prying eyes were less likely to linger. Ethan would bring what food he could spare, and in exchange, Lyra would share stories of distant worlds and ancient conflicts that made the teen's head spin. You speak as if you've seen all these places yourself, Ethan remarked one day as they sat in the shadow of a massive coolant pipe, the constant hum of machinery providing a comforting white noise. Lyra's shimmering skin rippled in what Ethan had come to recognize as amusement. Perhaps I have, young one. The universe is vast, and time has a way of blurring the lines between legend and lived experience. Ethan leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. But how old are you exactly? And what happened to make you, well, end up here? For a long moment, Lyra was silent, her glowing eyes dimming slightly. When she finally spoke, it was with a weight that made Ethan's breath catch in his throat. I am older than you can imagine, Ethan Parker, and my story is one of betrayal, loss, and exile. But perhaps it is time for some truths to come to light. As Lyra began to speak, the air around them seemed to shimmer, and Ethan found himself transported by her words. He saw, as if through a haze, a world of crystalline spires and floating cities. He felt the weight of a crown, the burden of leadership, the sting of betrayal. I was once Queen Lyra of the Ethereid, she said, her mental voice resonating with a mixture of pride and sorrow. My people were known throughout the galaxy as peacekeepers and diplomats. We used our gifts, our empathic abilities, and our living starships to bridge divides between species, to heal wounds centuries in the making. Ethan's mind reeled. But if you were a queen, how did you end up here? Like this? Lyra's form seemed to flicker, revealing for a moment a regal bearing that had been hidden beneath the guise of a beggar. There are always those who resent peace, Ethan, who profit from conflict and division. A faction within my own court, led by my treacherous cousin, staged a coup. They accused me of weakening our people through my policies of openness and cooperation. The images in Ethan's mind shifted, showing scenes of violence and chaos. He saw Lyra fleeing, pursued by shadowy figures with hate in their eyes. I escaped, but at great cost. My connection to my people, to our living ships, was severed. I've been adrift ever since, moving from station to station, world to world, always one step ahead of those who would see me silenced forever. As the vision faded, Ethan found himself back in the dingy corridor, staring at Lyra with new eyes. Why are you telling me this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The battle for Nexus Station and for the future of the galaxy had begun. Lyra's gaze softened. Because, Ethan Parker, in you I see a spark of what my people once were. Your kindness, your willingness to see beyond species and status, these are rare qualities in a universe grown cynical and cold. Ethan's mind raced with the implications of what he'd learned. But surely there's something we can do. We could go to the station authorities, tell them who you really are. Lyra held up a hand, her shimmering skin rippling with urgency. No, Ethan, the situation is far more complex than you realize. There are factions at play here on Nexus Station, hidden alliances and ancient grudges. My presence here is not entirely coincidental. Before Ethan could press for more details, a commotion erupted nearby. The pounding of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor, accompanied by harsh, guttural shouts. Zik-Rathi security forces, Lyra hissed, her form seeming to shrink in on itself. We must leave. Now. Without thinking, Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her into a narrow maintenance shaft he discovered during his explorations. They crawled through the tight space, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter behind them. When they finally emerged into a quieter section of the station, Ethan turned to Lyra, his expression a mixture of excitement and concern. What was that about? Are those Zik-Rathi working for your cousin? Lyra's eyes darted around, checking for any signs of danger before responding. Not directly, no, but they are part of a larger conspiracy, one that threatens not just me, but the stability of this entire sector of space. Ethan's head spun with the weight of these revelations. He'd come to Nexus Station hoping to prove humanity's worth, and now he found himself embroiled in what sounded like an interstellar political thriller. I want to help, he said firmly. Tell me what I can do. Lyra regarded him for a long moment, her glowing eyes seeming to peer into his very soul. Are you certain, Ethan? The path ahead is fraught with danger. Once you step onto it, there may be no turning back. Ethan thought of his parents, of their dreams for humanity's place among the stars. He thought of the casual cruelty he'd witnessed on the station, and of the kindness that still managed to flourish in unlikely places. I'm sure, he said, squaring his shoulders. Whatever's going on, I want to be part of making it right. A smile flickered across Lyra's face, the first true smile Ethan had seen from her. Very well, but we cannot act alone. There are others on this station, beings from across the galaxy who have reason to oppose the forces arrayed against us. We must find them, build alliances of our own. As they began to plan, Ethan felt a thrill of excitement mixed with trepidation. He was about to step into a world far bigger and more complex than he'd ever imagined. But with Lyra by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself living a double life. By day, he continued his work for Grix and other merchants, ears always open for useful gossip or signs of unusual activity. By night, he and Lyra moved through the station's shadowy underbelly, making contact with a diverse array of beings united by their opposition to the growing influence of extremist factions. There was Zorn, a grizzled Kronan mercenary with a cybernetic eye and a grudge against corrupt security forces. Melira, a Valarian data analyst who had uncovered evidence of large-scale resource theft and narrowly escaped an accident meant to silence her. And perhaps most intriguingly, Tizzle, a rogue Zik-Rathi scientist whose empathic research had led him to reject his species' hive mentality. As Ethan listened to their stories and helped coordinate their efforts, he began to see the bigger picture emerging. The conspiracy Lyra had hinted at was vast, involving elements from multiple species, all working towards a common goal: the destabilization of the current galactic order. But why? Ethan asked one night as their Rakta group huddled in an abandoned storage bay. What do they hope to gain from all this chaos? Tizzle's antennae twitched nervously as he spoke. Power, of course. In the aftermath of large-scale conflict, those positioned to offer solutions stand to gain immense influence. And there are resources at stake, whole systems rich in rare elements that could be seized in the confusion. Lyra nodded gravely. My cousin and his allies believe that strength comes through dominance, not cooperation. They see the current era of relative peace as a sign of weakness, a disease to be purged. Ethan's fists clenched at his sides. That's insane. Don't they realize how many innocent people would suffer? Melira's tentacles writhed in agitation. To beings like that, collateral damage is just an acceptable cost. They think on a galactic scale. Individual lives mean nothing to them. As the others continued to discuss strategy, Ethan found his gaze drawn to Lyra. The former queen stood slightly apart, her shimmering form seeming to pulse with barely contained energy. He realized with a start that her disguise was slipping. In moments of strong emotion, glimpses of her true, regal self shone through. Moving to her side, Ethan spoke softly. "Are you okay? I can't imagine how hard this must be for you, seeing the results of your cousin's actions." Lyra's glowing eyes met his, filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "It is difficult, yes. But seeing beings from so many different species come together, united in their desire for peace, it gives me hope. Perhaps the dream I fought for as queen is not lost after all." Ethan placed a hand on her shimmering arm, marveling at the way it seemed to both yield and resist his touch. "We'll find a way to stop them, Lyra. And when we do, we'll show the galaxy that there's a better path forward. One where compassion and cooperation aren't seen as weaknesses, but as our greatest strengths." A warm pulse of gratitude flowed through their telepathic link. "Thank you, Ethan. Your faith gives me strength. But remember, the road ahead will not be easy. Our enemies are powerful, and they will not hesitate to use any means necessary to achieve their goals." As if to underscore her words, a distant explosion rocked the station, sending tremors through the deck plates. Alarms began to blare, and the emergency lighting cast an eerie red glow over the gathered conspirators. Zorn was on his feet, in an instant, cybernetic eye whirring as it scanned for threats. That came from the central hub. Whatever's happening, it's big. Ethan's heart raced as he realized the implications. The gathering of diplomatic delegations, it's happening today. If they were targeting that. Lyra's form seemed to grow taller, her regal bearing fully evident now. Then the final phase of their plan has begun. The time for hiding is over. We must act now, or all will be lost. As the Raptor group rushed towards the source of the explosion, Ethan felt a strange calm settle over him. He was no longer just a human boy trying to prove his worth. He was part of something bigger, a fight for the very soul of galactic civilization. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew that the bonds forged in adversity between humans and aliens, outcasts and royalty, would be their greatest weapon against the forces of chaos and division. The central hub of Nexus Station was in chaos. Smoke billowed from ruptured conduits, and the air was filled with a cacophony of alarms and panic shouting in a dozen different languages. Ethan and his unlikely band of allies pushed through the throng of confused civilians and overwhelmed security personnel, their faces grim with determination. As they neared the diplomatic sector, the devastation became more pronounced. The sleek corridors, once a testament to the station's advanced technology, now bore ugly scorch marks and twisted metal. Bodies lay strewn about, some moving, many frighteningly still. Ethan felt his stomach lurch at the sight, but Lyra's steady presence at his side kept him focused. "Remember why we're here." Her mental voice resonated in his mind. "Every moment we hesitate, our enemies grow stronger." They rounded a corner and came face to face with a group of heavily armed Zigrathi, their chitinous armor gleaming menacingly in the flickering emergency lights. For a heartbeat, Ethan feared they'd walked into a trap. Then Tizzle stepped forward, his antennae quivering with a complex series of signals. The lead Zigrathi hesitated, mandibles clicking rapidly as it processed Tizzle's message. Then, to Ethan's amazement, it stepped aside, gesturing for them to pass. "What did you say to them?" Ethan whispered as they hurried past. Tizzle's compound eyes glittered with a mixture of pride and sadness. "I used an old Hive distress code, one that bypasses conscious thought and triggers an instinctive response. They'll be confused for a while, but it won't last long." Zorn grunted approvingly, his cybernetic eye whirring as it scanned for threats. "Nice trick, Buckman. Might come in handy if we run into more of your cousins." As they approached the main conference chamber, the sounds of conflict grew louder. Energy weapons discharged with sizzling cracks, and the deeper booms of more conventional explosives shook the deck beneath their feet. Malira's tentacles writhed anxiously as she interfaced with a nearby data terminal. The attackers have sealed off the chamber. They're holding the diplomatic delegations hostage. Lyra's form seemed to pulse with barely contained energy. This is it, the moment my cousin has been working towards. With the leaders of so many factions in his grasp, he can dictate terms to half the sector. Ethan's mind raced, trying to piece together a plan. There has to be a way in. Maintenance shafts, emergency overrides, something. I might have an idea, Zorn rumbled, his scarred face twisting into a grim smile. But you're not going to like it, kid. Minutes later, Ethan found himself crawling through a narrow waste reclamation tube, trying very hard not to think about the substances squelching beneath his hands and knees. Zorn's idea had involved accessing the conference chamber through its least guarded approach, one that most species would find too repulsive to consider. Humans, Malira had marveled as Ethan steeled himself for the task. Your adaptability truly is remarkable. Now, as he inched closer to his goal, Ethan could hear muffled voices growing louder. He paused at a junction, activating the comm device Malira had patched together from spare parts. "I'm in position," he whispered. "What's happening out there?" Lyra's mental voice came through clearly, tinged with tension. "The situation is deteriorating. My cousin's forces are growing impatient. They're threatening to execute hostages if their demands aren't met soon." Ethan's heart raced. "I'm almost there. Just need to get this panel open-hand." His words were cut off by a deafening explosion that rocked the entire section. The tube buckled, and for one terrifying moment, Ethan thought he would be crushed. Then, with a screech of tearing metal, the panel in front of him gave way. He tumbled unceremoniously into the conference chamber, landing in an undignified heap before a crowd of startled aliens. For a moment, there was absolute silence as both hostages and captors stared in disbelief at the grimy human boy who had literally dropped into their midst. Then all hell broke loose. Ethan rolled to his feet, adrenaline surging through his veins. He had mere seconds to take in the scene, the cowering diplomats, the armed insurgents, and at the center of it all, a towering figure that could only be Lyra's cousin. The Ethereum usurper was resplendent in gleaming armor that pulsed with otherworldly energy. His eyes blazed with cruel intelligence as they fixed on Ethan. "What have we here?" he boomed, his voice resonating on multiple frequencies. "A human child playing a heroics? How quaint." Ethan stood his ground, buying time. "It's over," he declared, trying to keep the tremor from his voice. "Your plan has failed. Stand down now, and—" The usurper's laughter cut him off, a sound like crystal shards scraping against metal. "Failed? Oh, you foolish boy. Everything is proceeding exactly as I have foreseen, including your arrival." With a gesture, the usurper activated a holographic display. Ethan's blood ran cold as he saw his friends, Lyra, Zorn, Malira, and Tizzle, surrounded by enemy forces, weapons trained on them from all sides. "Did you really think your little band of misfits could stop what has been set in motion?" The usurper sneered. "I've known about your pathetic resistance for weeks. In fact, I was counting on it." Ethan's mind reeled. Had they been play from the start? Was every move they'd made just another step in this monster's grand design? But even as despair threatened to overwhelm him, Ethan remembered Lyra's words. The spark of hope she had seen in him, the belief that compassion and cooperation were not weaknesses, but strengths. He straightened, meeting the usurper's gaze defiantly. "You're right. I am just a human boy. But I've seen things on this station, acts of kindness between species, alliances forged in the face of adversity. That's the real power in this universe, not your schemes and manipulation." The usurper's eyes narrowed. "Pretty words. But words will not save you or your friends. In moments, my forces will execute them, and I will present their deaths as the opening salvo in a war that will reshape the galaxy. Ethan's hand inched towards the compact energy weapon Zorn had insisted he carry. It felt woefully inadequate against the usurper's advanced armor, but it was all he had. "That's where you're wrong," Ethan said, a plan forming even as he spoke. "Your whole strategy relies on division, on turning species against each other. But what if they saw something different? What if they saw beings from across the galaxy standing together, willing to sacrifice everything for peace?" Before the usurper could respond, Ethan activated his comm device. "Now," he shouted. In that instant, several things happened at once. The doors to the chamber burst open as Lyra and the others broke free, having used the enemy's focus on Ethan as a distraction to overpower their captors. Teasel unleashed a piercing psychic shriek that sent the Zik-Rathi insurgents into confused disarray. Melira's tentacles flew over captured control panels, overriding security protocols and broadcasting the unfolding scene to every screen on Nexus Station. And Ethan, seizing the moment of confusion, launched himself at the usurper. It was a foolhardy move, born of desperation and a stubborn refusal to give up. The Ethereum leader swatted him aside effortlessly, sending him crashing into a group of diplomatic delegates. But Ethan's reckless attack had served its purpose. In those crucial seconds of distraction, Lyra had closed the distance to her cousin. Her shimmering form pulsed with power long held in check, the full majesty of an Ethereum queen unveiled. "It's over, Tharix," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "Your plan has failed, not because of superior firepower or cunning strategy, but because you fundamentally misunderstood the nature of true strength." Tharix snarled, raising a weapon that crackled with deadly energy. "You're a fool, Lyra. Always were. The galaxy doesn't want your soft-hearted idealism. It craves a firm hand, a singular vision." "No," came a new voice, wavering but determined. Ethan looked up to see one of the alien delegates, a being of living crystal, step forward. "We came here seeking dialogue, compromise. The young human speaks the truth. We are stronger together than we could ever be apart." One by one, other delegates voiced their agreement. The mood in the chamber shifted palpably as age-old rivals found common ground in their shared desire for peace. Tharix, seeing his support crumbling, let out a roar of frustration. He fired his weapon wildly, but Lyra was ready. She caught the deadly burst of energy in a shimmering field between her hands, her form blazing like a newborn star. "Enough, cousin," she said softly. "It's time to end this cycle of violence." With a gesture of infinite gentleness, Lyra redirected the energy Tharix had unleashed. It enveloped him in a cocoon of light, and when it faded, the usurper stood transformed. His armor had crumbled away, leaving him looking smaller, almost vulnerable. As security forces, the real ones this time, moved in to take Tharix into custody, Ethan felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. He slumped against a nearby wall, trying to process everything that had happened. Lyra was at his side in an instant, her glowing eyes filled with concern. "Ethan, are you all right?" He managed a weak smile. "Just another day on Nexus Station, right? Cleaning gunk out of waste tubes, facing down galactic usurpers. You know, the usual." A ripple of amusement passed through Lyra's shimmering form. "Your capacity for humor in the face of adversity never ceases to amaze me, and one." As the immediate crisis subsided and the process of restoring order to the station began, Ethan found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Delegates from a dozen species wanted to speak with him, to hear firsthand the story of how a human boy and a ragtag group of outcasts had thwarted a plot that threatened the entire sector. Through it all, Ethan felt a growing sense of purpose. He had come to Nexus Station hoping to prove humanity's worth to the galactic community. Instead, he had discovered something far more valuable: the power of compassion, courage, and cooperation to overcome even the darkest of threats. As he stood with Lyra and his newfound friends, watching the first tentative steps towards a new era of interspecies cooperation unfold before them, Ethan knew that their journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, old wounds to heal, and a galaxy still fraught with danger and discord. But for the first time since losing his parents, Ethan felt truly hopeful about the future. Whatever came next, he was ready to face it, not alone, but as part of something greater than himself. The gathering storm had been weathered, but the true work of building a lasting peace was just beginning. The aftermath of Ferrex's failed coup brought a fragile peace to Nexus Station, but Ethan and his allies knew better than to let their guard down. The conspiracy had run deep, with sympathizers and sleeper agents scattered throughout the station's many levels. Rooting them out would be a delicate, dangerous process. In the days that followed, Ethan found himself thrust into a role he never could have imagined: diplomat, strategist, and symbol of interspecies cooperation. The station buzzed with tales of the human boy who had stood up to a galactic tyrant, and everywhere he went, curious aliens sought him out. "I don't know how you do it," Zorn grumbled one day as they made their way through a crowded promenade, dodging yet another group of admirers. "All this attention would drive me to start shooting." Ethan grinned, though the wariness in his eyes belied his cheerful demeanor. "Maybe that's why they're not asking you to be the face of galactic peace, big guy." Their banter was cut short by a priority alert from Malera. "We've got trouble in the engineering sector." The Valarian's agitated voice came through their secure comms. "A group of Ferrex loyalists have taken control of the main reactor. They're threatening to overload it if their demands aren't met." Ethan's heart sank. They had known this relative calm couldn't last, but he had hoped for more time to consolidate their position. "What are their demands?" he asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. "The usual," Melira replied, her tentacles audibly writhing with frustration. "Release of Ferrex, safe passage out of the sector, and a hefty sum of untraceable credits." "Oh, and they want you, Ethan. Apparently, you've become quite the prize." Zorn's cybernetic eye whirred ominously. "Not happening. The kid's not going anywhere near those fanatics." But Ethan was already formulating a plan. "Actually," he said slowly, "this might be our chance to end this once and for all. Melira, can you get me a secure line to Lyra and the others? I've got an idea, but it's going to take all of us working together." An hour later, Ethan found himself approaching the sealed doors of the main reactor control room, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. A pair of heavily armed Zik-Rathi flanked him, their compound eyes scanning constantly for any sign of treachery. "I'm here," Ethan called out, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'm alone, just like you asked. Now let's talk about how we can resolve this without anyone else getting hurt." The massive doors slid open with a hiss of hydraulics, revealing a scene of tense standoff within. A diverse group of aliens, remnants of Ferrex's most fanatical supporters, had barricaded themselves among the reactor's sensitive control systems. At their center stood a towering Cronin, his crystalline body pulsing with barely contained energy. "So," the Cronin rumbled, "the famous human child graces us with his presence. I am Vex, and you will address me as the voice of the true order that will sweep away the weakness infecting our galaxy." Ethan stepped forward, projecting a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "I'm here to listen, Vex, but you should know that your position isn't as strong as you think. We've already begun evacuating the station. Even if you overload the reactor, you won't get the leverage you're after." Vex's crystalline features twisted into a sneer. "Foolish boy. Do you think we haven't prepared for such a possibility? The reactor overload is merely phase 1. As we speak, my agents are seizing control of the station's weapon systems. Soon, we will have the power to threaten not just Nexus, but entire star systems." Ethan's mind raced. This was worse than they had anticipated, but he had to keep Vex talking, buy time for the others to implement their part of the plan. "And then what?" Ethan pressed. "Say you get your demands met. What's the endgame here?" You must know the rest of the galaxy won't just stand by and let you rampage unchecked." Vex let out a booming laugh. "Oh, but they will. Once we demonstrate our power, the so-called civilized worlds will fall in line. Those who resist will be made examples of. A new age of strength and purity will dawn, with no place for weaklings and compromisers like you and that traitor Lyra." As Vex ranted, Ethan surreptitiously glanced at the reactor controls. There, almost imperceptible among the flashing lights and holographic readouts, he saw it, a tiny flicker of movement. Miller's nanobots, painstakingly maneuvered into position, were beginning their work. "You're right about one thing," Ethan said, drawing Vex's attention back to him. "I'm not strong, not in the way you mean, but I've learned that there are different kinds of strength. The strength to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. The strength to see the best in others, even your enemies." Vex's eyes narrowed. "Pretty words, but words won't save you or this station. Your time is up, human. Make your choice, submit to our demands, or watch as we reduce this symbol of weakness to atoms." The Cronin moved towards the reactor controls, his crystalline hand outstretched. But before he could make contact, a shimmering field of energy sprang up around the sensitive equipment. "What treachery is this?" Vex roared, wheeling on Ethan. Ethan allowed himself a small smile. "Like I said, different kinds of strength. Now, Lyra." The air itself seemed to ripple as Lyra materialized in the center of the room, her true form blazing with power. The Ethereum Queen had used her species' unique abilities to phase through the station's walls, bypassing all of Vex's defenses. "It's over, Vex." Lyra's mental voice resonated through the chamber. "Your agents have been neutralized. The weapon systems are back under station control. Stand down now, and we can end this without further bloodshed." For a moment, it seemed as if Vex might surrender. Then, with a bellow of rage, he charged at Ethan, his crystalline body shifting into a mass of jagged spikes. Time seemed to slow. Ethan saw Zorn burst through the door, weapon raised. He saw Tuzel's antennae quiver as the Zikrathi scientist prepared to unleash a psychic assault. But they were too far away, too slow to intercept the rampaging Cronin. In that eternal instant, Ethan made a choice. Instead of diving away, he stood his ground. As Vex bore down on him, Ethan reached out with his mind, drawing on everything Lyra had taught him about empathy and connection. "I'm sorry," Ethan said softly, meeting Vex's hate-filled eyes. "I'm sorry for whatever pain drove you to this, but it doesn't have to end this way." The impact never came. Vex froze, mere inches from Ethan, his crystalline form vibrating with conflicting impulses, and in that moment of hesitation, Lyra struck. A pulse of pure energy enveloped the Cronin, and when it faded, Vex collapsed to his knees, his body reverting to its natural, unweaponized state. "How?" Vex gasped, looking up at Ethan with bewildered eyes. "What did you do to me?" Ethan knelt beside the fallen Cronin, his voice gentle. "I didn't do anything. I just showed you another way. The choice was always yours." As station security moved in to secure Vex and his remaining followers, Ethan felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. The adrenaline that had carried him through the confrontation ebbed away, leaving him feeling drained and oddly hollow. Lyra was at his side in an instant, her shimmering form radiating concern. "Ethan, are you all right?" He managed a weak smile. "Just tired. Really, really tired. Is it always like this? Saving the galaxy, I mean." A ripple of amusement passed through Lyra's being. "Not always. Sometimes it's much worse." As the immediate crisis passed and the process of securing the station continued, Ethan found himself retreating to a quiet observation deck. He stood before the vast viewports, gazing out at the star-strewn expanse of space. He sensed Lyra's approach before he heard her. The Ethereum Queen moved to stand beside him, her presence a comforting warmth in the cool, recycled air of the station. "You're troubled," Lyra observed, her mental voice tinged with empathy. Ethan nodded, not taking his eyes off the stars. I keep thinking about Vex, about Tharix and all the others. They were so sure they were right, so willing to destroy everything for their beliefs. How do we fight that? How do we build something lasting when there's always someone ready to tear it all down? Lyra was silent for a long moment, her shimmering form pulsing gently with thought. We keep trying, she said at last. We face each challenge as it comes, with courage and compassion, and we remember that for every Vex or Tharix, there are countless beings across the galaxy who desire peace, who are willing to reach across the divisions of species and culture to build something greater than themselves. Ethan turned to look at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. You know, when I first came to this station, I thought I had to prove that humans were strong, that we could hold our own among all these advanced species. But now I think maybe our real strength is in admitting when we don't have all the answers, in being willing to learn and grow. Lyra's eyes glowed with pride. You've learned well, young one, and in doing so, you've taught us all a valuable lesson. The future of this galaxy doesn't belong to any one species or ideology. It belongs to those who are brave enough to imagine something better and stubborn enough to keep working towards it, no matter the odds. As if to underscore her words, a comm alert chimed softly. It was Malira, her voice excited. You two need to get to the main concourse. Something's happening. Curious and a little apprehensive, Ethan and Lyra made their way to the heart of Nexus Station. As they approached, they heard a growing murmur of voices, not angry or fearful, but filled with a cautious hope. The main concourse was packed with beings from every corner of the galaxy. At the center, surrounded by a respectful circle of onlookers, stood representatives from a dozen different species, many of whom had been bitter enemies mere days ago. As Ethan and Lyra watched, these representatives stepped forward one by one, each adding their thumbprint or equivalent mark to a glowing holographic document. What is this? Ethan whispered, awed by the solemnity of the moment. Tizzle's voice came from behind them, filled with quiet joy. It is the beginning of something new, my friends. A concordat, pledging mutual aid and cooperation between our peoples. The first step towards a true galactic community. Ethan felt a lump form in his throat as he realized the magnitude of what he was witnessing. This wasn't just the end of a crisis, it was the dawn of a new era. As the last signature was added, a cheer went up from the assembled crowd. Species that had once viewed each other with suspicion or outright hostility were embracing, sharing in a moment of collective triumph and hope. In that moment, looking out at the sea of diverse faces all alight with the same joy, Ethan knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The battle for Nexus Station was over, but the real work, the work of building a lasting peace, was just beginning. And Ethan, the human boy who had stumbled into the heart of galactic politics, was ready to play his part in shaping that brighter future. In the weeks following the signing of the Nexus Concordat, a new energy pulsed through the station. The air buzzed with possibility as former adversaries worked side by side, pooling their knowledge and resources to address shared challenges. Yet beneath this veneer of harmony, currents of uncertainty still swirled. Ethan found himself at the center of it all, a reluctant symbol of the new order. Delegates from across the galaxy sought his counsel, drawn by his unique blend of human intuition and hard-won galactic wisdom. It was a role he struggled with, acutely aware of how much he still had to learn. One morning, as he pored over reports of lingering unrest in the outer sectors, Lyra's shimmering form materialized beside him. You look troubled, young one, she observed, her mental voice tinged with concern. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his unkempt hair. It's just so much. Every decision we make affects millions of lives across dozens of worlds. How can we be sure we're doing the right thing? Lyra's form pulsed gently, a gesture Ethan had come to recognize as her equivalent of a reassuring smile. Doubt is not weakness, Ethan. It is the seed of wisdom. The fact that you question, That you weigh the consequences of your actions is precisely why you are suited for this role. Before Ethan could respond, an urgent alert flashed across his datapad. His eyes widened as he scanned the message. We've got a problem. A big one. Minutes later, Ethan, Lyra, and their core team were gathered in a secure briefing room. Melira's tentacles writhed anxiously as she brought up a holographic display of the sector. We've detected a massive energy signature approaching Nexus Station, the Valarian explained. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. Whatever it is, it's big, it's powerful, and it's headed straight for us. Zorn's cybernetic eye whirred as he studied the readouts. Could be a weapon. Maybe Ferrix had a backup plan we didn't know about. Tizol's antennae twitched nervously. Or it could be something worse. There are ancient powers in this galaxy, slumbering leviathans that make even the might of the Aetherium seem insignificant. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine at the Zikbrathi's words. He turned to Lyra, hoping for reassurance, but the former queen's glowing eyes were distant, troubled. Lyra, Ethan prompted gently. Do you know what this is? For a long moment, Lyra was silent. When she finally spoke, her mental voice was heavy with the weight of long-buried memories. It is not a weapon, nor is it some cosmic horror. It is, my people. The full might of the Aetherium fleet approaches. A stunned silence fell over the room. It was Zorn who finally broke it, his gruff voice uncharacteristically subdued. I thought your people had abandoned this sector after Ferrix's coup. Why would they return now? Lyra's shimmering form seemed to pulse with conflicting emotions. I do not know, but I fear that their arrival may undo everything we have worked so hard to build here. Ethan's mind raced, trying to process the implications. The Aetherium were legend, their advanced technology and innate abilities a stuff of galactic myth. Their return should have been cause for celebration. So why did Lyra seem so troubled? What aren't you telling us? Ethan asked, meeting Lyra's glowing eyes. There's more to this, isn't there? Lyra nodded slowly. The Aetherium are not monolithic. There have always been factions within our society, competing visions for our role in the galaxy. Ferrix's coup was as much a manifestation of these internal conflicts as it was a bid for personal power. She paused, her form shimmering with barely contained emotion. I fear that those who now approach may share more of Ferrix's philosophy than my own. They may see the Nexus Concordat not as a step towards harmony, but as a threat to Aetherium supremacy. The implications hit Ethan like a physical blow. Everything they had worked for, the fragile peace they had built, could be undone in an instant by the very people Lyra had once led. So what do we do? He asked, looking around at his friends and allies. How do we protect what we've built here? Tizol's compound eyes gleamed with sudden inspiration. Perhaps we don't need to protect it. Perhaps we need to showcase it. All eyes turned to the Zikbrathi scientist. Encouraged, Tizol continued, his words coming faster as the idea took shape. The strength of Nexus Station of the Concordat lies in our unity. We are not just a collection of species coexisting. We are a new form of community, greater than the sum of our parts. Melira's tentacles writhed excitedly. Yes, we could prepare a demonstration, a testament to what we've achieved here. Show the Aetherium that there's a better way forward than domination or isolation. Zorn grunted, his cybernetic eye whirring skeptically. Pretty words and science projects aren't going to impress a battle fleet, folks. But Ethan was already nodding, a plan forming in his mind. Maybe not, but actions might. Lyra, you said the Aetherium have competing visions for their role in the galaxy. What if we could show them a vision so compelling, so undeniable, that it would bridge those divisions? Lyra's glowing eyes fixed on Ethan, a spark of hope kindling within them. What do you propose, young one? Ethan took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to suggest would be dangerous, potentially catastrophic if it went wrong. But he also knew, with a certainty that ran bone deep, that it was the right thing to do. We invite them in, he said simply. All of them. We open Nexus Station not just to their leaders, but to every Ethereum citizen who wants to see what we've built here. We show them not just our technology or our achievements, but our way of life, the way we've learned to work together, to overcome our differences. The room erupted in a cacophony of voices, some supportive, others raising objections, but Ethan pressed on, his voice rising with passion. Think about it. The Ethereum have been isolated for so long, viewing the rest of the galaxy through the lens of their own superiority. But if we can show them the reality of what we've created here, a true galactic community where every voice is heard, where diversity is our strength, it could change everything. Lyra's form pulsed with a complex swirl of emotions, pride, fear, hope, all mingled together. It is a bold plan, Ethan, perhaps even a foolish one, but she paused, her glowing eyes sweeping across the assembled team. But it may be our best chance, not just to preserve what we've built, but to expand it in ways we've only dreamed of. Over the next few days, Nexus Station was a hive of feverish activity. Every species, every faction represented on the station threw themselves into the preparations. Ethan marveled at the creativity and dedication on display. The Valarians constructed breathtaking holographic displays showcasing the scientific breakthroughs born of interspecies collaboration. The Zikrathi organized a series of cultural exchanges, demonstrating how diversity had enriched their hive minds rather than diluting them. Even Zorn got into the spirit, working with a team of engineers to showcase how different combat techniques from across the galaxy had been synthesized into a new, more effective form of peacekeeping. As the Ethereum fleet drew closer, Ethan found himself standing once again in the observation deck, gazing out at the star-strewn expanse. The first ships were becoming visible now, their sleek forms shimmering with otherworldly energy. He sensed Lyra's approach before he saw her, the air thrumming with her presence. "It's really happening," Ethan said softly. "Everything we've worked for comes down to this moment." Lyra moved to stand beside him, her shimmering form a comforting presence in the face of the approaching unknown. "Indeed. But remember, Ethan, no matter what happens next, what all of you, have achieved here is real. The bonds you've forged, the understanding you've cultivated, these things have a power beyond any fleet or weapon." Ethan nodded, drawing strength from her words and from the knowledge of all they had overcome to reach this point. "I just hope it's enough," he said. As if in response to his words, a comm alert chimed softly. It was Malira, her voice taut with tension. "They're hailing us. The Ethereum fleet is requesting permission to dock." Ethan took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. This was it, the moment that would determine the future not just of Nexus Station, but potentially of the entire galaxy. "Tell them they're welcome," he said, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. "All of them. Nexus Station opens its doors to our Ethereum brothers and sisters." As the first shuttles began to dock, Ethan made his way to the main concourse, Lyra at his side. They were joined by representatives from every species on the station, a living testament to the diversity and unity they had fostered. The doors slid open, and the first Ethereum delegates stepped through. Their forms shimmered with barely contained power, their glowing eyes taking in the assembled welcoming committee with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. At their head stood a figure that made even Lyra draw in a sharp breath, tall and regal, with a corona of energy that pulsed like a captive star. This could only be the current Ethereum sovereign. Ethan stepped forward, his heart pounding but his voice clear. "On behalf of Nexus Station and the Galactic Concordat, I bid you welcome. I am Ethan Parker, and I stand ready to answer any questions you may have about our community." The Ethereum sovereign regarded Ethan for a long moment, their glowing eyes seeming to peer into the very depths of his being. When they spoke, their voice resonated on multiple levels, both audible and telepathic. "Ethan Parker, we have heard much about you, the human child who would reshape the very fabric of galactic society." The sovereign's tone was neutral, giving no hint of approval or condemnation. We have come to see for ourselves whether the tales of this experiment are true. Ethan met the sovereign's gaze steadily. Then let us show you, he said, gesturing to the diverse array of beings around them. Not just what we've built, but who we are, who we've become together. As the Ethereum delegation began to disperse, guided by representatives from various species, Ethan caught Lyra's eye. In that shared glance was a wealth of unspoken communication, pride, hope, and the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it united. The Queen's gambit had been made. Now, it was time to see how the game would unfold. The days that followed the Ethereum arrival were a whirlwind of activity, tension, and cautious hope. Ethan found himself constantly on the move, mediating discussions between curious Ethereum visitors and the station's diverse inhabitants. Every interaction felt charged with potential for breakthrough or disaster. One afternoon, as Ethan guided a group of Ethereum scholars through the station's bustling marketplace, he overheard a heated exchange. A young Ethereum, their form flickering with agitation, was arguing with a grizzled Cronan merchant. But it's inefficient, the Ethereum insisted, gesturing at the colorful array of goods. Why not simply synthesize what you need? Why engage in this primitive bartering? The Cronan's crystalline features twisted into what Ethan had learned was a smile. Inefficient, perhaps, but there's joy in the haggling, young one, in the story behind each piece. That's something no synthesizer can replicate. Ethan watched as confusion, then dawning comprehension spread across the Ethereum's shimmering face. It was a scene he had witnessed countless times over the past few days, moments of cultural collision that led not to conflict, but to understanding. Later, as the station's day cycle dimmed to simulate evening, Ethan found himself once again in the quiet of the observation deck. The Ethereum fleet hung in space beyond the viewports, a glittering constellation of power and possibility. "You've done well, Ethan Parker." The voice, resonating on multiple frequencies, belonged to the Ethereum sovereign. Ethan turned, trying to mask his surprise at the leader's sudden appearance. "Thank you, Your Majesty," Ethan replied, bowing slightly. "But the credit belongs to everyone on this station. I'm just lucky enough to be part of it." The sovereign's glowing eyes studied him intently. Perhaps it is no accident that a human child stands at the center of all this. Your species is young, volatile, but also adaptable in ways that continue to astonish us. Ethan felt a swell of pride at the sovereign's words, but also a twinge of unease. Does that mean, have you decided about Nexus Station, about the Concordat? The sovereign was silent for a long moment, that gaze turning to the stars beyond. We have seen much in our time here. Marvels of cooperation, yes, but also inefficiencies. Conflicts barely held in check. It is not what we expected. Ethan's heart sank. Had all their efforts been in vain? But before he could respond, the sovereign continued. "It is better." Ethan blinked, not sure he had heard correctly. Better. The sovereign's form pulsed with what might have been amusement. Indeed, we came expecting to find a naive experiment doomed to failure. Instead, we have witnessed a new kind of strength emerging. One born not of uniformity, but of diversity. It is intriguing. Hope surged within Ethan, but he tempered it with caution. Does this mean the Ethereum will support the Concordat? Support it. The sovereign's voice held a note of surprise. Young Ethan, we intend to join it. The implications of those words hit Ethan like a physical force. The Ethereum, the most advanced and powerful species known to exist, were choosing to become part of something greater than themselves. As if sensing his thoughts, the sovereign continued. It will not be easy. There are factions among my people who will resist this change. But what you have built here, what all of you have built together, offers a vision of the future that we cannot ignore. Ethan's mind raced with the possibilities. With the Ethereum's knowledge and resources added to the Concordat, there was no limit to what they might achieve, but he also recognized the challenges ahead. Thank you, Ethan said earnestly. This means more than I can express. But may I offer a suggestion? The sovereign inclined their head, a gesture for Ethan to continue. Join us as equals, Ethan said, not as leaders or saviors, but as partners. There's so much the Ethereum can teach us, but I think you'll find there's a lot you can learn from the other species too. A ripple passed through the sovereign's shimmering form, surprise, respect, and perhaps a touch of amusement. Wisdom from one so young. Very well, Ethan Parker. We shall take your words to heart. As the sovereign departed, Lyra materialized beside Ethan, her glowing eyes filled with a mixture of pride and wonder. You continue to amaze me, young one, she said, her mental voice warm. Do you realize what you've accomplished? Ethan shook his head, feeling suddenly overwhelmed. I just did what felt right. All of us did. Lyra's form pulsed gently. And in doing so, you may have changed the course of galactic history. Come, the others are waiting. There is much to discuss. The next few weeks were a blur of negotiations, celebrations, and planning sessions. The news of the Ethereum's decision to join the Concordat sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Delegations from hundreds of worlds descended on Nexus Station, eager to be part of this new era of cooperation. Ethan found himself at the center of it all, working tirelessly alongside Lyra, Zorn, Malira, Tizel, and countless others to shape the expanded Concordat. There were heated debates, moments of frustration, and no shortage of challenges. But through it all, the spirit of unity that had been born in crisis proved resilient. On the day the new charter was to be signed, Ethan stood before a vast assembly of beings from across the galaxy. The main concourse of Nexus Station had been transformed into a grand ceremonial space, with holographic displays allowing countless others to witness the event from afar. As Ethan stepped up to the podium, he felt a moment of panic. What could he, a human boy barely into his teens, say to this assemblage of the galaxy's most powerful and influential beings? But then he looked out at the sea of faces, human and alien, familiar and strange, and found his voice. Not long ago, I stood in this very spot, a lonely human child trying to prove that my species deserved a place among the stars. I thought that to be strong meant to stand alone, to be self-sufficient. Ethan paused, his gaze sweeping across the gathered delegates. I was wrong. True strength, I've learned, comes not from isolation, but from connection. From recognizing that our differences are not weaknesses to be overcome, but strengths to be celebrated. He gestured to the diverse array of beings around him. Look at us. A few months ago, many of our species were at odds, if not openly hostile. Now we stand together, ready to forge a future greater than any of us could have imagined alone. Ethan's voice grew stronger, filled with conviction. This Concordat is more than just a political alliance or a trade agreement. It's a promise. A promise that we will face the challenges of the future not as competitors, but as partners. That we will pool our knowledge, our resources, and our unique perspectives to solve problems that none of us could tackle alone. He turned to where the Ethereum sovereigns stood with their delegation. To our Ethereum friends, I say this. Your decision to join us as equals, to add your incredible gifts to our collective effort, fills us with hope and gratitude. But know that you are not saviors descending from on high. You are fellow travelers on this grand journey, with as much to learn as you have to teach. Finally, Ethan looked directly into the cameras transmitting his words across the galaxy. To those watching from afar, whether you're part of the Concordat or not, I extend an invitation. Come to Nexus Station. See what we're building here. Bring your ideas, your cultures, your unique ways of looking at the universe. For it is only by weaving together the threads of our diverse experiences that we can create a tapestry strong enough to withstand whatever the cosmos may throw at us. As Ethan stepped back from the podium, a moment of silence fell over the assembly. Then, starting slowly but building to a thunderous crescendo, applause erupted. It was joined by a cacophony of other sounds, the ululations of avian species, the resonant hums of crystalline beings, the telepathic waves of approval from psychic races. It was the sound of a galaxy united, if only for a moment, in hope for the future. In the days and weeks that followed, as the expanded Concordat began to take shape, Ethan found moments of quiet reflection. He thought of his parents, of their dreams for humanity's place among the stars. He hoped that somehow, somewhere, they could see what he had become part of. One evening, as he stood on the observation deck, watching ships from 100 worlds come and go, Ethan felt a familiar presence beside him. "You seem troubled, young one," Lyra observed, her mental voice tinged with concern. Ethan smiled ruefully. "Not troubled, exactly. Just wondering what comes next. For so long, all our energy was focused on this moment. Now that it's here, I'm not sure what my role is anymore." Lyra's form pulsed gently, a gesture Ethan had come to recognize as her equivalent a reassuring touch. "Your role, Ethan Parker, is whatever you choose it to be. You've opened doors that many thought forever closed. You have shown the galaxy a new way forward, but the path you walk from here is yours to decide." Ethan nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "You know, when I first came to Nexus Station, I thought I had to prove humanity's worth to the galaxy. Now I realize that wasn't the point at all." "Oh," Lyra's mental voice held a note of curiosity. "And what was the point?" Ethan turned to her, his eyes shining with the reflected light of distant stars. "To show that every species, every individual, has worth. That we're all part of something greater than ourselves, and that together there's nothing we can't achieve." As if in response to his words, a brilliant light flashed in the depths of space, a new star being born, its first rays reaching across the vast distances to touch Nexus Station. Ethan and Lyra stood in comfortable silence, watching the celestial display. In that moment, with the newly expanded Nexus Concordat taking its first steps and the promise of a united galaxy stretching out before them, anything seemed possible. A new era had indeed dawned, and Ethan Parker, the human boy who had once felt so alone among the stars, was ready to help shape it, not as a leader or a hero, but as one voice among many in the grand chorus of galactic civilization. The adventure, he realized with a mixture of excitement and contentment, was only just beginning.